All right, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties all of a sudden. So everybody bear with me while I try to figure out what's going on with my camera. All right, so we're gonna bear with me here for just a minute. I'm gonna switch computers, and for whatever reason, it's showing the video preview, but not showing up for everybody. So bear with me just a minute here. fucking works. All right, I'm here. So I don't. All right, we're still working through some stuff here, so I apologize. I don't know what's going on, but we're gonna go ahead and roll with it. So everybody, welcome to the small shit show that we're dealing with here. And today on the episode, we have Dustin Maxfield. I actually served with him for the last couple of years that I was in, and we did our deployment to Iraq in 2009 together. Dustin's a great dude. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with him, especially after this little bit of a hurricane hiatus that we've had. Last couple of weeks have been delayed, but here we go. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Dustin in and apologize for the delay. So here we go. What's up, man? How are you?
Buddy? How goes it?
Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Wow, this is killing me here today. Good Lord, bear with me a second. All right, can you say something, Dustin?
I can say whatever you want.
There we go. Got it. Holy Christ. What a shit show this has been. All right, so I'm not in my normal studio. I'm actually in Florida, so I had to pirate the National Claims Institute's podcast studio and use their cameras and all this stuff, and it just didn't fucking work. So here we are. So how the hell have you been? Haven't seen you in a couple of years now.
Living life, man. Just grinding.
Yeah. So now you are teaching up in northern Indiana, correct?
Yeah. Teaching over at Park Heritage High School in Rockville, Indiana.
Very cool.
Teaching U.S. history, economics, psychology, all that good stuff.
Nice.
Coach wrestling. So.
Yeah. So Dustin sent me a photo last night of his knees being iced up after wrestling practice. We are not young men anymore, my friend.
Yeah, that whole shape doesn't apply to wrestling anymore.
Yeah. So what we normally do on the show is we kind of talk a little bit about the background. Obviously, you and I know each other personally, so it's a little bit different. But I think you and I joined about the same time. I know I was just prior to September 11th. I think you were in actually longer than I was, correct?
Yeah, January 2001. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, you got me by some months there. And so what did that look like for you? Because I was in the middle of basic when the towers fell. So what did that look like for you because you at that point, I assume you would have been just finishing up AIT and hadn't been at your first duty station very long, correct?
Yeah. Well, actually, so I did my first little stint in the military. I did in the reserves. My dad thought I would go to college after high school. That did not go as planned. Just chalk that up to poor life decisions. So I enlisted 2 days after my 17th birthday. I knew the military is what I wanted to do. Me and my dad sat down for a long talk, and he talked me into going into the reserves. So I did a split up. I did the split op program. I did basic training between my junior and senior year. I graduated in 2002. But it's crazy because I just had this conversation with the kids. With the anniversary of 9/11. With all the head trauma that I've had in my life, the one thing I can remember is the play-by-play what happened on 9/11. I had broken my ankle in a football game. We were on our way to get x-rays, and my dad always had the news on in his bedroom. And I was waiting for him, and I was sitting on the edge of his bed when the news broke, and all I saw was the plane flying to that tower. So, like, that whole car ride, because, being from rural Indiana, it takes 30 minutes to get anywhere. We're listening to the news, and we're listening to it unfold, and then we get to the doctor's office, watching everything on TV. It was insane. But you know what I really like to tell the kids is, you know, 9/11 is a great tragedy. I understand that, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But my God, do I miss September 12th, man? That like, I wish these
Oh yeah.
kids, I wish these kids could understand what it's like to live in a country like September 12th, the day after, and the
Right.
month follow, when it was just so proud to be an American, and like you couldn't buy an American flag. Like my
Right.
dad was so pissed he couldn't find an American flag because he's an OG patriot. He's been flying American flag, you know, forever. And when he couldn't find an American flag, he was livid. And so like I think as we go on, like we kind of lose sight of kind of how important that day was to us as a nation, man. And I challenged, you know, all of them, just go home and ask your folks where were they during 9/11. I guarantee you they could tell you exactly what they were doing.
Well, and I'm assuming a lot of these kids weren't even born yet.
No, that's a great thing.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for kicking me in the. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Look, I'm here for you.
Really?
Because I remember the posts a few years ago. Everybody saying, you know, we have finally entered that age where kids who were not born on September 11th are now joining the military. You know, and you were like, well, fuck. I guess we went off and got old. You know. I didn't get to experience what you're talking about. I mean, like I said, I was in the middle of basic when that happened. The only thing I got to see was the first set of people ever going AWOL, right? Yeah. Like we had guys literally trying to escape basic training. We had parents showing up and, you know, you're not sending my baby to war and all this other shit. And, you know, it was interesting in its own right, but we heard about it coming out of basic, you know, a lot of the patriotism that existed. It was always those pictures of like rows of houses with nothing but flag on every single one of them, or the banners or whatever. But you know, with you having to,
I've been fortunate because, you know, I grew up in a rural town, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come back here, is just small town living is just, it's just gooder. I'll just say that. All right. It's just, you know, everyone's just so tight knit. But it's crazy you said that, because like we live right down the road from, we don't live, school is right down from the road from the new chemical depot, where they were storing all the VX gas. And I mean, we had parents come and pick kids up from school and everything. I mean, so there was, even in the smallest parts of America, you know, there was that sense of panic. But then that next day, everybody, you know, schools were gathered around the flagpole and praying, and it was just, I just miss those times, man. Especially, you know, being, you know, a history buff and a history teacher, looking back at history, seeing all this and see where we're at now. I mean, what I wouldn't give to just live like it's September 12th, 2001, man.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, unfortunately, I don't think it's realistic, right? And we haven't seen anything comparable to that. And I hope that we never do, right? Yeah. But, you know, there's always the weird shit. Like there was the Boston Marathon bombing. There was, you know, insert 20 other events that have happened since then, none to that magnitude. But I think it's important to know at some level, though, that even those events did spark a little bit of the ember back up. And, you know, we saw in I know you were in the same time I was, there was a big influx from like 04 to 08 of guys joining. Right. Yeah. And, you know, I know that they released and kind of let loose on some of the standards and all of that. But, you know, my class coming out of basic was the first class to graduate post September 11th. So when we got through, the military that I knew, even though I was in prior, was nothing that everybody else that I was, you know, going when I first got to my first duty station. And I spent my first 10 years at Campbell. Right. So I didn't know anything different than that, even though I was in prior. And my reasoning for joining was not related to September 11th in any capacity. You know, and then it's guys like us who end up on 4, 5, 6 deployments. Cause I know you ended up, how many did you end up doing?
Yeah, I did 3 in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so you got me by one. I'll take it. But that conversation come up a lot as I started to get out, because we were that generation, we were that age, right, where you got out, from 2012 to 2016, to have 4 deployments, 5 deployments, 6 was unheard of, right? And it was always interesting to see the look on people's faces when they were like, "What, did you ever go overseas?" And you're like, yeah, a couple times,
Yeah.
And then then you get the typical questions. And I think one of the things I definitely wanted to touch on with you tonight was you're teaching children now about essentially an entire adulthood of war for you. Is there a way to have that conversation with these kids where it's not glorified? It's not the movie war. It's real world, real life situations, but also not hit the opposite end of that spectrum where it's too much for them to process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know what, man? I love my kids, man. And I'll tell you what, I keep it as real as possible when it comes to me. I don't try to do I try to keep everything realistic, real life. I use a lot of my own experiences. I tell my psychology class all the time, they have no idea how lucky they are to have a psychology teacher, like literally crazy and heavily medicated. I mean, have psychology class based on my life, but we do talk about it. We talk about it all the time. And, especially being in a small town, these kids haven't been anywhere else except for maybe on vacation, a majority
Right.
of them. So they have no experience what it's like in the actual world. And the one thing I like about my experiences is especially working, in the 160th and in that whole kind of sub special operations group, is that, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. There's going to be some people.
Oh man, yeah, they're gonna have a fucking field day.
Okay,
Look,
so special operations group is that we traveled all the time. We worked all over the United States. A lot of guys, spend a lot of time overseas. It's not years at a time. It's a few months, but they're doing it over and over again. So when or when I say that I've been around the world, I'm not just saying I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've had different experiences and different things. And I think that's why I actually like teaching so much, is because I can share different experiences.
Right.
We're getting ready to talk about the Civil War. Most of these kids have never been to the South, so they have no idea
They don't know they don't know where the Mason-Dixon line is at all.
They're like, well, I've been to Kentucky. Listen, if you ever go to the South and say Kentucky South, you're going to be in trouble, because that's not how they. But I do, man. I try to protect, I think, well, you know me. I keep it humorous, man. I'm not that. We actually had this conversation today. Somebody's asked me about the military and stuff, and I tell them straight up, I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy that, I was in the Army, so I'm automatically a badass and I know how to do everything. Dude, I pumped gas and threw rockets. I was unfortunate to have some different experiences, but I'm not that guy who's oh, I'm a veteran, you have to treat me differently. This is something I chose to do, man. And I don't expect people to just say, oh, you're a veteran, you're so awesome. I was awesome before I was a veteran. So
that's right. Yeah.
It's just my kids, they like to talk about it, and I try to keep, like I said, I'll keep it humorous, but I keep it realistic with them too. They know it's real world stuff, but then again, they know that not everything is Call of Duty and John Rambo and crap like that. I tell them all about me being on guard duty and me delivering bottled water and having to climb a stupid canal with, a hole in my waders, and just meticulous stuff like that. So they don't, So they don't get this false impression of all veterans. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that was honestly for years, man. I absolutely avoided, unless you knew me and knew that I was in the Army, I didn't broadcast it. You get the whole, there was a good window of time where people would see you walking through the mall or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh, you got a beard and tattoos? Were you in the military?"
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I was. But I was kind of the anti-veteran thing for quite a while, and I know Amy and I sat around and talked a handful of times, and it just got to a point where I realized that my time in service, it put me in a position to be able to utilize certain skills and be successful in business. And, and that's really what kind of started this whole thing. Was I continually run across people who got out of the service, they picked their path and they're running with it. Yeah. And we see so many people that got out who are doing nothing. Right. And then on the flip side, we see so many, we're inundated with those. And I know that you were in the special operations community for the last couple of years, but you see a lot of these guys that lived in that tier 1 world where it's like, no, get up and make your bed and run 57 miles tomorrow and don't take anybody's shit. You're a monster. You're a beast. Like, does that apply? Yes, absolutely applies somewhere. Some people need that. They need to read the self-help books and the motivational posters with kittens on them and shit. And if that's you, great. I have zero issue with that. But there's nobody kind of speaking for the everyman, because there's so many of us that made E5, E6, maybe E7, did a handful of deployments, went through a bunch of shit, and then got out and had to figure out what we were going to do with our lives, right? Because I was no longer putting fuel in helicopters. I was no longer running water in different places in weird countries, So that was really the premise of starting a lot of this, was to have these conversations, right?
Yeah. And what's crazy, and I was thinking about this when, we were chatting last night, and I was asking, well, is there anything I need to know? Because I'm not a stats guy. I don't write down stats, and I just...
Yeah.
But
I wing it.
So, the thing is, and I just want to preface this with, I love my time in the military. It provided me and my family a great life. So I don't want anybody to get the perception that I'm downplaying or dogging the military, because I'm not. The military is great at taking care of your family, but they do a really shitty job at taking care of the soldier. And, I'm just going to use my personal experience as a matter of reference. I actually avoided getting out of the military twice because, and it was the best choice, first of all, because a lot of problems we see are entitled to get a job simply because they're a veteran. Right. If that's you and you're listening, I'm telling you right now, bro, don't plan on it. All right. So when I was going through, I don't know, I think they call it Soldier for Life now, ACAP, right? Mm-hmm. I'm around and I'm listening to these briefings and stuff. And even some of the briefers will say, oh, well, these slides are from the 1980s. Yeah. What are you doing to help this soldier transition? Because nothing. Reading a slide from the 1980s is not going to help you. And even for me, the Voc Rehab lady came in and she was asking everybody, what do you want to do? I said, I'm going to be a history teacher. She actually laughed at me, told me good luck, and told me I would not find a job. Right? Really? This is transitioning out of the Army. Well, guess what? I'm on my second year as a history teacher. I win, you lose. Right? Right. But soldiers think they can just get out without a plan, man. You have to have a plan, because the world's going to eat you alive if you don't.
Yeah, and we're not designed coming out of the service to fit into this bullshit. And, the last time we had a show prior to this hurricane hitting, and Jessica was my guest. She's actually on here throwing a couple of comments up. We talked about that. We're veterans are designed, they just don't realize it, to be entrepreneurial, right? And I think a lot of times that term gets taken out of context. It's, you know, people immediately are like, oh, that means I'm going to go start my own business and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, it is, in my opinion, it's setting a stage for yourself and then maximizing your potential in that space. And, you know, for you, example, that's teaching. You want to teach, you know, and I think again, for guys like us, which you and I think we have a lot of similarities as far as personality type and that sort of stuff goes. And, you know, I taught in the military, you taught in the military. I teach outside, you teach outside. I teach adults, you teach the kids in high school. And, you know, there's an application for that. There's something there that I've always enjoyed doing. I love getting up in front of people and talking. I'm a massive introvert, but put me in front of a room full of people that I can have a positive impact on. I'm going to do it every single day of the week.
Yeah. And that's, you know what, and that's the thing is, I don't think this system, getting out of the military, is really adequately preparing soldiers for what's ahead. Like I said, I had somebody come in and straight up tell me, like, you can't do this. You won't be successful.
Right.
Are you being serious right now? And it's like, you're not just talking to me. We're in a group of people.
Yeah, you're mass blasting some shit.
It was the craziest thing. But, you know, a lot of guys, I'll backtrack on that. There are some good things. You know, they have these massive job fairs. The jobs are out there. Like, you can get those people that are looking for your type if that's what you want to do. But you have to be willing to take those risks. Like, I went to a job, had no intention of ever working outside. Like, I knew I was going to leave the Army, go to college. I was going to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to those job fairs just to get the experience of interviewing. My first job fair I went to, I got an on-the-spot offer from DHL. You know, I applied for these jobs that in reality I was no way qualified for, but I was just practicing my interview skills. Yeah. And I almost became like a pretty, you know, I almost obtained some pretty good positions. Mm-hmm. I just oddly enough, I didn't have a college degree. That's the only reason I didn't get these jobs. Right. But it's not that the Army's just doing a shitty job. It's that the soldiers aren't taking advantage of what the Army is giving them. Like, you have to be willing to put in the work. Like, if you're just going to go there and just to get your box checked and you have it in your mind, well, I'm just going to move home and somebody will give me a job because I'm a veteran, I'll get veteran status, or I'm going to get a GS position. If you notice, everybody who's teaching those classes, they're always, majority of them are either spouses or they're retired senior enlisted or retired officers. There's no Bowski or Sergeant Maxfield in there teaching classes because it's hard for us to grab up those. If you're an E6 or below, to get a GS job like that, it's hard. Yeah. Because you have to compete with these first sergeants and these sergeant majors who, realistically, if we're just being honest, like, you guys are getting a check regardless. Like, you're getting that retirement check. You're getting that E9 retirement check. Right. These guys are E4s, E5s getting out. They have no idea what the hell they're going to do. So it's kind of stacked. The odds are kind of stacked against the ordinary Joe, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Because, one, we have completely outdated systems, reading slides from the 1980s. All right. Then we have these senior enlisted guys and these officers who are retired. They're working on their second retirement, trying to tell you, well, you can or can't do this because you're not going to make money. Dude, you're getting a check, man. Get me somebody who lived it, who struggled, who did. Like, you don't have to hire them. Bring them in as a guest speaker. I want to hear from somebody who's lived the life, who's experienced it, and who struggled with it. And that's what we're lacking. You're not presenting any experience to these soldiers getting out. You're experiencing these guys reading slides that were written by somebody 30 years ago. It's just not realistic, in my opinion. Well, and then you take, I mean, I'll use my example or my scenario as a good example, right? So we got back from Iraq in 10, and I came off a dwell time August of 11, and they hadn't updated my dream sheet since I joined the Army. I had updated it,
but it never got updated in the system. So when the unit that we were still in came back up on orders again, I was like, cool, I'm going to fucking deploy again. Then I'll make number 5 at Fort Campbell. I'm cool with that. And I got a call from headquarters, and they were like, hey, you're going to Fort Carson. I was like, why the fuck am I going to Fort Carson? And they said, well, it was on your dream sheet. And I said, not for like fucking 10 years. It hasn't been on my dream sheet. And they said, yeah, sorry, you're going to Fort Carson. So I went to the sergeant major and I was like, hey, can we stop my orders so I can deploy again? Because it became habitual at that point, right? It was a comfort zone when you like it. For me, it made more sense to go back to Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever they were going, instead of going to another duty station, going through that transition and all that shit. So,
and then just end up deploying anyways.
Yeah, and I didn't. I tried. I got out to Carson. I was in processing. I said, who's on deployment orders right now? And they're looking at me like, why? And I was like, because I want to go. Like, I'm not trying to stay here. I don't want to fucking be here. And they, I ended up, my back was fucked up, and they sent me to the NCO Academy. I'm fucking drawing a blank on the acronyms. Doesn't matter. But they, I couldn't pass the PT test because I couldn't do the push-ups anymore. And so my sergeant major comes to me and she's like, what are you trying to do? And I said, I mean, at this point, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to deploy, but I can't get into a deployable unit now because now my back's fucked up. And she said, well, you got 2 options. We can start a med board or we can chapter you. And I said, what's the med board look like? And she said, well, it'll be 1 to 2 years. We're going to do some back surgeries. And if they don't work, we'll do another back surgery, and then we'll do another back surgery. And I said, well, cool. Can I go back to Fort Campbell to do this? Because I'm from Tennessee. And they said, no, you got to stay here. And I said, all right, so let's talk about the chapter. And she said, we could chapter you out for being overweight. And at the time I wasn't. And she said, but we can have you home in like 2 weeks. So put that in perspective of all the things that you just said. I got, hey, we can have you home in 2 weeks. It took 3, but in a 3-week period, I did all my paperwork and took my ass to the house. No real out processing, no ACAP, no job fairs, no nothing. Just, hey man, See you later. And so then all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, all right, so what am I going to do? So I immediately started going to college using my GI Bill, drew unemployment from the military for 6 months or whatever, got a job at FedEx, which is horrible, by the way. They're like the only delivery service that's not unionized. And so they're all contractor owned and they can pay you whatever they want to pay you. So I made $500 a week, which was less than I was making in the military, and moved to Texas for a job. Job went to shit, went back to FedEx, moved back to Texas, did this back and forth thing. And then finally kind of caught my stride a few years ago and saying, you know what, I live well in this space. I need to find an operational position that kind of marries the way that my brain works. But everything that I went through exactly coincides with what you just said, where we're not doing shit for these guys. The people who are in charge of ACAP, and one of my first squad leaders works at the SRP site at Fort Campbell. And, I would love to one day have a conversation with him about, what does that look like for you guys? Are you guys just scripted, check the box, move them to the next one? Like, because we're not helping these guys. You have somebody helping build a resume and it's just a bunch of keywords. Be like, what rank were you? What was your job? Okay. These are the management keywords that we want you to use. These are the skills, and they don't take into account, especially as an NCO, how ingrained into your service members' lives that you are. Their spouses, what their kids' birthdays are, their finances, that they haven't washed their ass in 3 weeks. Like, all of these things. And there's a certain depth to that management that you can't correlate to the civilian world.
Yeah. About that is, you brought up that whole resume writing thing. That's actually the slideshow I was referring to. So I had a good friend that she was an HR.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote my resume, like the 1980 slideshow said.
Yep.
Well, then I was talking to her and I said, hey, could you mind if I just send you my resume and you can look at it, because this is what you do for a living.
Right.
Like, legit look at resume. You could tell me what you're looking for. And she ended up, helping me reword it, switch it up, and things like that. And I kid you not, like, I applied for these jobs that I was in no way qualified for. However, the way it was written, like, it caught people's eyes. So why are we using a slideshow presented by somebody who doesn't work in human resources to help soldiers who are getting out of the military? We're supposed to be setting them up for success. Why don't we have an HR person who does this for a living?
Yeah.
Doing this, helping soldiers.
Well, yeah, no, it's see a need, fill a need, even on the GS side. I mean, when I started working for the Corps of Engineers, it was that way. I had a WS or WY position. WG. Sorry, wage grade, right? And I got fired from that, which is hilarious. But so I can't ever. I have an SF-50 from the feds saying I can no longer ever work for the federal government for the rest of my life. And it was because I took Cooper to work with me one day, and I had it approved. But then somebody caught wind of it, pitched a fit. The dude who approved it came back and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about this," and they fired me on the spot for violating Department of Homeland Security safety protocols is what they got me for. So, but my point was, all of the GS level people that were there were college graduates, like fresh out of college, like a butter bar lieutenant, or, no offense, Jessica, because I know you're still watching, like some 05 or above who just paralleled their military service into the Corps of Engineers. I'm not hating on those people. That system was put in place for them to transition pretty smoothly. And I know I saw her comment here. She said even as a major, she couldn't get a GS-9 position. That ought to tell you something too, right?
Yeah.
And she was an intel officer. So like, you're going to tell me that somebody in a position where information is key every day of your life, that doesn't parallel into some sort of GS level position within the feds? Like, that's crazy to me.
Bro, I kid you not. I applied for a job at the ASP that me and E4, and a lot of times E4s by themselves did on a routine daily basis.
Yep.
They were asking for a person with a PhD.
Yep. Yeah, because you need a PhD to count bullets. Nope. We have lost Dustin. We'll see if he clicks the link and comes back in. But that's it. That's one of those things that, oh, there he is. Cool. I was going to try and fill space for a minute, so I'm really glad you came back. But, it takes a PhD to be able to count bullets, right? And make sure that the weight of the brass and C-clips weighed out to what it needed to. But I applied for it at the ASP. I applied to range control. And I think you were a master gunner, a small arms master gunner as well, weren't you? You and I went through that together. That entire goddamn school was designed around running ranges.
Yeah.
But you couldn't get a job at range control. Like, it was the craziest shit, man. And I think that that's part of the big problem when guys transition out, because they've done one thing. They've done one job for X amount of years. And I know as fuelers, they always told us, you can go get a job at any airport in the country. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. And so, look, I mean, and unfortunately, that's what it is. And that was a big part of why I started this. I hope that somewhere, some guy's fucking around on the internet runs across this podcast, picks one and says, wait a minute, I never even thought about it that way. And, I try to find one clip in every podcast, and I throw up on TikTok and I do whatever. You've already given me my quip for this one, so we're good. But we can go down this rabbit hole. What? Yeah, you're right. See you later, man. It was good having you on the show. Yeah. So now I'm gonna kind of transition a little bit here. So you and your wife were married the entire time that I knew you in the service. You guys are still together, right? That's kind of an anomaly in military service. And oddly enough, a Facebook memory or something had come up from when we were deployed, and your wife had sent me a message saying something along the lines of, because I had done something that was sweet for my ex-wife, and Nicole sent me a message and she said, hey, can you get with Dustin and make sure that he does some sweet stuff for me? And I was like, yeah, no, not doing it. I'm not going down that road. I'm not getting in the middle of all that. But your guys' relationship has worked. It has been through all these deployments. You know, is there something that, because, and the reason I'm going to go down this road is very specific. So when you get out, your spouse is now subjected to a completely different version of you, right? The one that was in the service, who put the uniform on every day, who had that task and purpose all the time, isn't who you are anymore. And so to be able to make it through all of that, even post service, like what advice would you give? Because you guys have done it, you guys have made it. And it looks like your video's froze, but I can't, or you're just a mannequin. I can't tell.
Sorry, I was listening.
No, it's still froze, but I can hear you.
You know, honestly, man, getting out of the service was the biggest trial that that our relationship really had.
Mm.
So what a lot of people don't know about that, I didn't have to get out of the Army. There were some things that happened that I wasn't really happy with. I had a little bit of a parachute accident. Things just started to change after that. As always, you know, me and my leadership didn't really see eye to eye on things. And I was kind of, I'm not going to say robbed of some opportunities, but I wasn't, in my eyes, treated fairly. And it all came down to an NCOER. Of course, my NCOER was not good. I got, you know, like I was rated like 12 out of 14 or 13 out of 14 E6s. And then, you know, they gave you the bullshit line. Oh, well, so-and-so is up for his first look at 7s. Rate him higher.
Yeah.
Man, if that's the way it's going to be, I'm out of here. I'll take a med board. But it really, like me and my wife, really, we made that decision together. Like I always, if my heart's not in something, I'm not going to subject myself to it.
Right.
And, you know, I was having physical problems with my head and my, you know, my body and stuff, but I didn't get out. I chose to, and there's a lot of different circumstances surrounding that. One is the fact that I've already missed so much time with my family, and my kids were older, and, you know, I'm going to miss all that time with them still. So it was just my time to leave. But when I did leave, it wasn't pleasant. You know, when my last 4 years, I pretty much lived out of a suitcase. You know, I was gone at least 2 weeks out of every single month. So Nicole, my wife, she pretty much did and took care of everything. And as I was like, you know, transitioning, I felt like I was out of the loop a lot of times. Like it's just natural. She just took care of everything. And I didn't know what was going on or what to do. And then, you know, in all honesty, that's when kind of the demons started to come out. You know, I became a real asshole. And it's the first time I realized that I needed to go seek help. You know, I vaguely remember, but, you know, there was a point where I had my son against the wall screaming in his face over something super petty, like super petty. And it was that transition. You know, when I had my first round of therapy, she just pointed it out. She's like, you and your wife don't know. And it just kind of clicked. Like,
you broke up. I didn't hear what you said. You said you and your wife, what?
We didn't know how to live together. We didn't know how to be around each other all the time.
Yeah.
And like, told me that, like, at first I was a little standoffish, like, you know, what are you, like, we're not here to talk about me and my wife. We're here to talk about me.
Right.
Like on the drive home, it clicked. Like, we're not used to being, you know, in the same house, let alone the same room together every single day. So that transition in itself was rough.
Yeah.
You know, I was closed off. She just kind of let me be because I was being an asshole. So, and it sounds cliche, but we started talking. Like, you know, I would let
Look,
her
man, I am the biggest advocate for communication. And, you know, I don't know if my wife's watching tonight or not, but you have to be able to communicate. And I think for us as service members, we become so desensitized to a lot of things, and we're forced to do that. It's not because it's not by happenstance. Like it's just kind of pushed and pushed and pushed. Like, hey, you don't have time to process this. Process it later. Well, then you never process it, right? And Amy and I went through that same thing when I first got out the first few years, where I was an asshole. We couldn't coexist. And when we got to the point where we could actually sit down and have a conversation, now granted, I don't, you know, you have those conversations with people where you're willing to let little tidbits of your service kind of come in. You sprinkle them in there like a little extra seasoning, but there's those ones that you just don't talk about to anybody. Now, you and I can talk about things because we serve together, or guys that, like a couple of the guys that are watching, we could have those conversations because we have a similar situation, or we were in that situation together. Right. But even now there's certain things that I don't talk to Amy about, and it's not because I don't want to, it's not because I don't love her. It's not because I'm fearful of, you know, any sort of judgment or misunderstanding or weird perception of it. It's just, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to relive it. And we're able to grow. We've been able to grow together over the years, being able to communicate that there's not really a reason to do it. Right. And you have to be able to communicate.
And that, you know, that's the thing is, you know, once we got to the point, and we're still working on it, it's still a work in progress, but
it always is, and it always will be.
But that's one thing they don't tell you during your transition process, that, oh, by the way, your family life is probably going to suck because you don't know how to talk to your wife, right?
Yep.
And that sounds stupid. And if I was sitting in that class and they were actually having it, I probably would have been like, oh, this is retarded.
Right.
But looking back on it now, that's something that would have really helped. You know, that's lost time that me and my wife have. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's absolutely correct.
We've already lost so much time. Even when I'm home, I wasn't there. And she used to tell me that. And I used to say, you know what? You're crazy, whatever. But it took me going to somebody else, a complete stranger, and them kind of telling me that to really make it click. And, you know, that, and you listen, when you get out of the military, especially if you spent, you know, the better half of a decade in the military, like, life goes on for everybody else.
Man, technology's whooping my ass tonight, man.
We good? We're not good. We're good?
No, we're good. We're good.
Oh.
We're here. Yeah, sorry. Mine just cut out for some reason.
You were just staring at me like blankly.
Oh, it was froze on your end. It went black on my end. So it's totally fine.
Yeah,
totally
but
fine.
Like, life goes on for your friends in the military. They're going to, like, for me, you know, I was spending weeks and months with these guys at a time, more time than I'm really spending at home with my wife and kids.
Yep.
And then I leave. Well, their life goes on. So it's not like I can just call them and be like, hey, man, you want to hang out? Oh, man, I'm on this trip. Or, oh, I got this other trip going on. Oh, I'm in school. So, like, I pretty much left the military friendless. Like, I didn't really have anybody. Yep. So, you know, on top of that, with all the things that I'm struggling with in my head, and then, you know, unintentionally kind of pushing my wife away, I tried everything to try to find a sense of belonging, not really understanding that it was right there in front of me the entire time. Right. So when I got out, I tried to be a Boy Scout leader. I was a Cub Scout leader for a stint. Then I found something I was super passionate about. I started a nonprofit. But even with that, I engulfed myself in that. And I was still kind of pushing my wife away, even with that. I jumped right in, and I just engulfed myself in that. You know, then I became like super involved in the American Legion and the American Legion Riders, which was not too bad because she was kind of included in a lot of things we did. But what I didn't realize was my sense of belonging was literally sitting either right next to me or kind of across the room this whole time. If I would have just kind of talked to her, opened up to her, and not had to find something to keep my mind occupied all the time, like I feel like I would have, had made up a lot of the time we've missed together, but instead I just kind of lost more. And like, there's certain things I don't regret. Like, I don't know why I tried to be a Boy Scout leader. Like, it was probably kind of creepy. Got this big bearded tattooed guy that looks like fresh out of prison, doesn't have kids in the Boy Scouts, just coming in and being a Boy Scout leader.
Right.
The sheepdog thing, that was something I wanted to serve the community. So I jumped in and I did it. We ended up dissolving, but it wasn't because we failed at anything. And it was because, like, I had to move on. Like, I had a career, like, I had to start and things like that. Contrary to popular belief, nonprofit work doesn't pay. I didn't get a paycheck. I spent more money. I spent more of my own money than anything, just trying to get it up and going. But I mean, those are things I don't necessarily regret. I just wish that I would have kind of involved my wife more instead of like making it more about me, thinking, oh, I have to do this because this is going to be my identity, my sense of belonging, and things like that.
Well, and you lose that. You lose that when you get out. You lose that sense of purpose, and you lose it, especially for guys like you and I who straight out of high school went straight into service, and our entire adult life, our identity was service. Right. Our identity was putting that uniform on every day. And all of a sudden you go turn in your ID card and they say, see you later, Dustin. It was really great seeing you. And you're like, who the fuck is Dustin? And so
and that's the crazy part about it, though. I never told my wife, like, this is my problem.
Mm-hmm.
It always had to come to, for a long time, me and my wife never fought about anything.
Right.
But it had to come to having a big blow up that was essentially for no reason, that could have been completely solved if we could have just communicated with each other.
Right.
And that's the crazy part about it. And like I said, if you would have given me this class when I was going through that whole ACAP Soldier for Life program, I probably would have been like everybody else during class and just be like, oh man, is it lunchtime yet? This is stupid. This isn't me, blah, blah. But, as I was actually experiencing it, something could have clicked and been like, oh, hey, jackass, they talked to you about this. They told you this was going to happen. So I really think, man, with these transitioning soldiers, sorry.
Those guys. Those guys.
Is make it realistic for them.
Yeah.
Well, and give them real.
Sorry, you got a little choppy there. I thought you were done. I remember it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Sergeant Kinnison messaged me and he was like, hey man, I'm going to give the surmise version because I've been hitting the head and I don't remember every part of this, but it was very much hey man, I think I'm considering getting out. What do you think? And I said, don't fucking do it. You're too close to retirement. Ride that shit out. And, now he's sitting in Hawaii, living his best life, being a contract and procurement NCO. Dude's fucking killing it. I'm pretty sure he made E7. He'll probably make E8 before he retires, and I look back at that conversation and, I appreciate that he at least wanted my opinion. Not that he needed it, but that was my battle. Like that was my right. But then, like you were saying, you get out and you lose all these people. You lose touch with all these people, and that's why, what was it, 2 years ago? I was like, hey man, I'm going to be in Clarksville. Let's grab lunch. We went to a fucking Denny's, but who cares? Right. Like we were able to sit there and shoot the shit for a little bit and catch back up. And, it's always trying to circle back to the guys that you served with, and where this parallels to what you were just saying about communication is our version of communication with the guys that we served with is, fart and dick jokes, right? But it's that's how we process the situations that we're in. It's how we process the feelings that we're having. You don't outwardly say it. You joke your way through it. You fight your way through it. You, whatever it is, but you can do that with those guys. You can do that with the guys that you served with. You can't go home and have that same conversation with your spouse and it's not just your spouse that feels it. Your kids feel it. Your friends that you had outside of the military feel it. Your parents feel it. I remember going to my mom after I got out and having that conversation because my dad was a corpsman during the Vietnam era, and asking him, like, because I had talked to him about some of this stuff. I had talked to him about the soldiers that got killed and whatever, and like the response that I got from him, not that it was bad, it was just, it wasn't what I needed. And I remember talking to her about it, and she's like, I've been married to him for 30 some odd years and we don't talk about that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So
that's the crazy thing about it is, we hear it all the time, is the stigma.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry. So Brian just posted, he's out here working the hurricane, and he's one of maybe 3 or 4 vets that are on the team of guys that he's with. And he said nut to butt, and made perfect sense to him. The rest of the guys were like, huh?
No idea. No. We talk about the stigma and you know what? It was hard to hide some things from my family that have happened when they, the phone call they get is to let them know that something bad happened and I'm okay.
Right.
So it's really hard. I've lost friends, but like when I got out of when I was med boarding, I actually got a 0% rating for PTSD.
So did I.
Because when I went in there, they were asking me about my support system and things like that. And I said, I have a very good support system. I have a good family, things like that. And they actually rated me 0%.
Yep.
And Same. They didn't even classify it as post-traumatic stress. They classified it as something else.
Do they give you a social anxiety? Because that's what they gave me.
And I just let it go for a little bit, because at this time, I was starting to get involved with the Legion, and I was hanging out with Vietnam vets and things like that. So it's not really, I didn't feel like it was my place to complain. And
right.
then one of those vets, he actually just recently passed, one of my good friends, we were talking about it one day. He said, that's bullshit. You need to fight this. And I went to the Gold Building in Nashville. My wife had to drive me because the one thing I've learned being a psychology teacher is that forcing people to talk about things and relive trauma isn't healthy all the time. Like, there's a time and a place for it, but it's not good to force people to relive these incidents just so you can get an idea of what they're going through. So I was so nervous and anxious going into this appointment to get reevaluated that my wife had to drive me. And I went into the Gold Clinic in Nashville. I was in there for probably not even 10 minutes. I was in and out. The guy asked me a few questions. He asked me where I med boarded out of. I told him, and he said, we're going to have this fixed right away. Within a few days, I had a new rating.
Really?
What is it? I mean, in reality, just because I have a good family support system, just because a soldier has a good family support system, doesn't mean that inside they're not still battling.
Oh, yeah.
I battle with things all the time. You battle with things all the time. It's just because you have a good support system. Like, I choose not to disclose some things because I don't want my family to look at me in a different way.
Right.
I'm one of those guys, I don't say PTSD. I jumped on the bandwagon. I say PTS because I don't like to feel like I don't have a disorder. Like, I'm just an ordinary guy that went through an extraordinary event.
Or events. Yeah. Plural.
It's natural to have a disorder reaction. It's not a disorder. It's not unnatural. It's a very natural reaction. So I don't buy into that disorder bullshit. But in the end, man, like, you're not giving these these soldiers any hope, because now you're just telling them what you've always told them. You know, it's like a sick call protocol. Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Just drink some water. You'll be okay.
Yep.
But mental health's not anything to mess around with, man. That's what I like. That was my biggest problem getting out, is when they did that to me. And I wasn't fishing for a rating. And I'm not, it's not about, getting more money or whatever, but it's like, I had these experiences. You're telling me that they're not valid, but you weren't there.
Right.
So you don't. And that was my biggest thing, man.
Well, and I'm 90%. But it's not for any one particular thing. I have a bunch of little things, and then my PTSD rating is high. And it's the looks that I get from people when they find out, regardless of the percentage, that you're a disabled vet. They're like, wait, you are? Like, you seem just fine. I'm like, yeah, it's because we don't need to talk about the shit. It's made me who I am, but it doesn't define who I am. Right.
Exactly.
I've been able to.
That's why I say, like, I don't buy into the whole disorder thing, because a disorder, not essentially, but it kind of does define. It doesn't define you. It confines you in certain aspects of life. Well, this doesn't confine me. Like,
right.
I'm actually very open in some respect. There's certain things that I'm very open to talk about. And then there's some that I don't feel comfortable talking about. But that doesn't, like, just because, like, I've had these experiences, that doesn't define who I am. I'm not, like, doesn't make me any different.
Right.
It's, like I said, it's natural, man. It's completely natural to go through an experience and then have a reaction to it. And if anyone's otherwise, I'll slap them in the mouth right now. Like, it doesn't, like, it's just.
Yep. But I also think that alternatively, a lot of people use it as a crutch, and not even just PTSD or PTS. Like, a lot of people use their time in service in general as a crutch. They use it as a crutch for, a lot of the entitlement for certain things. They want their 10% at Applebee's, right? They want their.
Oh my God! We're talking about this today.
Yep. So, and that's where I get frustrated. And I think that's why for such a long time, I was in the mindset that I was in, where I didn't care to talk to people about being a vet. Yeah. If you knew I was a vet, cool, but we didn't need to have a further conversation about it. And because I saw so many people use it as some sort of leverage, as a tool to get some stuff that they wanted. And I never used it. My work ethic was defined by my time in service. And I use that every day. Right.
Yeah. That's the thing. I don't want to be hired on any job because I'm a veteran.
Right.
Because that's looking at my skills and my qualifications. Like, you've been in the Army. How many senior enlisted people could not qualify with a weapon? How many people couldn't pass it? Like, not every in the military are these super citizens. How many soldiers have you personally out of the Army for doing drugs and things? Like,
I had an E7. I don't mean to cut you off. I had an E7 during a PT test. Turn around a quarter mile before the turnaround and yell to me, Sergeant Rabowski, turn around. I'm like, but I'm not there yet. And he's like, I don't care. We're both turning around. I got to pass this PT test.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's one thing soldiers need to learn as they're transitioning out of the Army. You don't need to get it in your head that the world owes you anything because you're a soldier. And I don't mean to be hard with that. I will shake your hand and I will respect you for the decision that you made to serve your country. But with ordinary people, they really don't actually owe you a whole lot because you made that decision. It was your choice to take that oath. Now, I know I'm one of the that think that way, but it's like, if we look at like the whole Colin Kaepernick incident that happened, they're like, oh, you're in the military, you got to be pissed about it. Not really, man.
I don't give a shit. Look, I don't like the guy, but I'll give him credit where credit's due, right? Like, the motherfucker stood up for something that he believed in, whether I believe in the same thing or not. He risked a lot, and he lost a lot. But
and that's the thing, like, people think, oh, well, you're in the military, you have to think a certain way. No, you don't, man. Like, this dude did something great. I don't care. I don't really watch NFL football anyway, so it doesn't bother me. It's
Right.
like, well, he's disrespecting you as a soldier. Really? How? Because when I took my oath, I will serve or defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Like, that's his right. He's got that right, just as much right as you over your mouth, man. Come on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get out of here. All right, man. Well, look, we could talk for hours, and honestly, I want to have you back at some point. If you're cool with it, like we always have, inevitably somebody's gonna have to cancel at the last minute or something. I hope that I'd be able to give you a shout and be like, hey man, can you fill in tonight? But this has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate your time, and I'll give you a call later on tonight or tomorrow and just kind of talk about some stuff. And tell Nicole I said hi, and I'm glad you were able to get up there and get back to your neck of the woods and start teaching and doing the stuff that you love. So
yeah, man, that's another thing, man. Don't let the naysayers and haters stop you, man. I was told that I wouldn't succeed and I wouldn't get a job, and I was told I was stupid for moving back home, but I shit you not, this is the happiest I've ever been.
Yeah, no, and look, that's the whole point, right? You got to find your thing. You got to find your happy. Yep. So, all right, man. Well, I'm going to kick you out of the studio and do my outro here and get on with the night. So again, man, it was good seeing you, good talking to you, and I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, you, brother. I appreciate being here.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, buddy.
So thanks everybody for watching tonight. We had a little 2-week hiatus there, but great guest to bring us back into the usual norm here. So hopefully everybody took something from tonight, and that's going to end it. And we will see y'all next week.